In the shadowed valleys where ancient pines whispered secrets to the wind, there existed a world unknown to most of humanity, a realm where goblins and trolls had forged an unlikely alliance. These creatures, long portrayed in folklore as enemies, had discovered a shared appetite for human servitude. The goblins, with their cunning minds and nimble forms, proved masterful at infiltrating human settlements. Their eyes, gleaming like polished obsidian in the darkness, could spot the perfect moment to strike. The trolls, meanwhile, provided the brute force necessary to subdue their prey, their massive forms casting mountainous shadows across the terrified villages they raided. Together they had perfected their cruel trade, the acquisition and subjugation of human slaves. Deep within their underground kingdom, hundreds of captured humans toiled in endless darkness. The caverns echoed with the sound of picks striking stone, chains rattling against rough-hewn walls, and the occasional whimper of despair. The goblins, ever watchful, darted between the workers with their barbed whips, while trolls stood guard at every exit, their bulk blocking any hope of escape. Among these unfortunate souls was Marcus Blackwood, a former merchant who had been captured 3 years prior. Unlike his fellow captives, Marcus had learned to observe, to study the patterns of their captors, and, most importantly, to gain their trust. He performed his duties with such apparent dedication that even the most suspicious goblins began to let their guard down in his presence. What none knew was that Marcus had been meticulously planning an escape, not just for himself, but for all the human slaves. He had discovered ancient tunnels, mapped guard rotations, and slowly, carefully, gathered small tools that could be fashioned into weapons. His fellow captives looked to him with hope, seeing in his quiet confidence a chance at freedom. On the night of the winter solstice, when the trolls and goblins were distracted by their dark revelries, Marcus put his plan into action. Using carefully crafted copies of the guards' keys, he began releasing slaves from their chains. Group by group, they slipped through the forgotten tunnels he had discovered, their hearts pounding with both fear and hope. The escape seemed miraculous. Nearly 300 slaves made their way to an abandoned mine shaft Marcus had prepared as a temporary sanctuary. As they huddled together in the darkness, tending to their wounds and sharing their first moments of freedom, they hailed Marcus as their savior. But in the depths of that night, while the former slaves slept, Marcus slipped away. He made his way back to the Troll Kingdom, not as a fleeing slave, but as a returning conspirator. For months he had been secretly negotiating with the Troll Chieftain, offering something far more valuable than his own freedom, the chance to eliminate all the troublesome slaves in one fell swoop. The trolls and goblins descended upon the hiding place with terrible efficiency. The trapped humans, still weak from years of captivity, stood no chance against the coordinated assault. Their screams echoed through the caverns, a symphony of betrayal and despair. Marcus watched it all from beside the Troll Chieftain, his face an expressionless mask. He had indeed won his freedom, but at a terrible price. The trolls, true to their word, spared his life and elevated him to a position of authority, the overseer of their realm, responsible for maintaining order and discipline. Yet as Marcus stood in his new chambers, adorned with the fineries his position afforded him, he realized the true horror of his choice. The trolls had granted him exactly what he'd asked for, freedom from slavery. But in its place, they had given him something far worse, an eternal position as their chief torturer and executioner, forced to oversee the suffering of any future captives. In the end, Marcus discovered that his chains, though invisible, were stronger than ever. His nights were haunted by the faces of those he had betrayed, and his days were filled with the tasks he had sought to escape. He had gained power but lost his humanity, a transaction that would torment him until his dying day. In the deep valleys where ancient pines still whisper their secrets, they say you can sometimes hear Marcus's laughter echoing through the caves, a sound that starts as triumphant but slowly transforms into sobs of despair. for in gaining everything he thought he wanted, he had lost everything that made him human. And the trolls and goblins? They had gained something far more valuable than a mere slave. They had created a monster more terrible than themselves, a human who had willingly embraced their darkness.